One of the most recognizable weapons and a constant in all of FromSoft games is the memorable Moonlight Greatsword, or the Large Sword of Moonlight, or the Holy Moonlight Sword, however you prefer to call it. Throughout the games, this weapon received multiple changes, and it is in Demon Souls where we find that this sword scales with faith, before it was changed to intelligence scaling. Taking into consideration that faith is my favorite stat in the Souls games, this weapon very quickly became one of my top picks for any Demon Souls run. And so, we have the Moonlight Knight, a pure faith build that focuses on the Large Sword of Moonlight that, in the remake of Demon Souls, has been made to be the most beautiful weapon you can ever wield. As always, we will review the stats of this build, the equipment that we use, and of course its applications in both PvE and PvP. Since there is a lot of ground to cover, I have created timestamps in the description of this video in order to make it easier to navigate the content and give you the opportunity to skip straight to the part that interests you the most. Let's get started. The objective of this build is to maximize the potential of the Large Sword of Moonlight while maintaining a good degree of survivability and offering alternative options for damage when we find ourselves in New Game Plus 2 and beyond. While this is an extremely fun build and one that I use often in jolly cooperation, it does have the issue of losing damage when you start entering the later New Game cycles. This does not stop it from being useful, as the special characteristics of the Large Sword of Moonlight and the incredible amounts of damage that we can achieve through Wrath of God all offer options that make this build worth the time you invest in it. To reach this objective, we will be running the following stats. Start the game as a priest. This class is the most efficient to reach the required stat block, allowing us to make use of every soul level possible. I created this build to be efficient in both PvE and PvP, so we're sticking to soul level 120. Finally, this is the stat block that you want to end up with. 40 Vitality, 13 Intelligence, 40 Endurance, 14 Strength, 8 Dexterity, 8 Magic, 69 Faith, and 8 Luck. To reach this point, I recommend that you take the following path. Your first priority should be to get your Vitality and Endurance to 20. These are the stats that will allow you to take more hits and attack more times while maintaining good mobility. When you start a build from scratch, being able to live is more important than dealing a lot of damage. Your second priority is to level up Intelligence to 13 and Strength to 14. We want to knock these out early because they are needed to meet the requirement to use our chosen weapons and cast our chosen spells. Your third priority is to get Faith to 40. You will spend most of your first playthrough leveling this up. This is our main stat, and we want to be able to deal damage and cast the spells that support us. Your fourth priority is to get Vitality and Endurance to 40. By now you should either be in or around New Game Plus, and it is important to give our character an extra boost of survivability. Your final priority is to take your faith all the way up to 69. As mentioned before, it is our main stat, and we need to go as high as possible. So, why do we use these stats? Allow me to explain. Vitality at 40 because it is the minimum I like to use at this soul level to be comfortable. We will have 1325 HP in human form, 662 HP in soul form, and 927 HP in soul form with the Cling Ring. I personally would not go any lower. Intelligence at 13 because it is the minimum amount that we need to be able to get just over 100 MP with the help of the Silver Coronet. I just want to cast a few spells that require this amount of MP. We are not looking for any more magic slots. Endurance at 40 because we want the most stamina possible for mobility and weapon swings, and the extra equip burden opens up your options for fashion souls. Since this is a melee-based character, we want our stamina as high as possible. Strength at 14 because we want to meet the requirement to wield the Night Sword, a secondary type weapon that will give this build a lot more options. Dexterity at 8 because it is the base level for the priest. We do not need it, so we do not level it up at all. Magic at 8 because, again, it is the base level for the priest. We do not need it, so we do not level it up at all. Faith at 69 because it is the main stat of our build. It increases our weapon and spell damage through its scaling. It also provides us with the maximum miracle slots in order to be able to attune the spells that we need. Also, nice. Finally, Luck at 8 because, for the last time, it is the base level for the priest. We do not need it, so we do not level it up at all. Moving on to the equipment, you will notice that we are using the Large Sword of Moonlight. I mentioned it before, and it should not be a surprise to anyone. This build is made for this weapon. It is a very special weapon that deals pure magic damage, and its blade is made of pure light, and this means that it cannot be blocked by shields. It is a great weapon to get through enemies that provide annoyances by hiding behind their shields, like the Red-Eye Spear Knights, for example. The fact that it only deals magic damage is mostly a blessing and sometimes a curse. Most enemies do not have a good magic defense, meaning that you will do more damage. That said, there are a few exceptions of enemies that have considerably high magic defense. This is when we suffer. With the current stats, the Large Sword of Moonlight reaches an AR of 331. Now, this is not very impressive for a greatsword, but taking into consideration that it deals pure magic damage, meaning no split damage, and that it goes through shields, the lower AR is understandable. Also in the main hand, you will find our talisman to be able to cast spells. Nothing surprising here. I want to make a quick note of always carrying in your inventory a Blessed Night Sword plus 5. This weapon deals split damage, but it has a higher AR than the Moonlight Sword, and it is considerably faster. There are times when using this weapon, with a shield, sword and board style, is the best way to proceed through a level. There are also times where some demons are better slayed with this weapon. Let's not forget that it is blessed, meaning that it offers us 6 HP per second regeneration. Whether you use it or not, it is always good to have it ready. On the offhand, I run 2 pieces of equipment. First, the Kite Shield plus 10. This is a standard shield that has considerable guard, meaning that it will block quite a few hits. It also allows us to parry. I mostly keep it to use with the Night Sword, but it is also very useful with the Moonlight Sword as well. The second offhand equipment is the Blessed Iron Knuckles plus 5. This is a very important part of the build. You are able to keep this at your side while you're two-handing the Large Sword of Moonlight. This allows you to continue the 6 HP per second health regeneration while taking advantage of the special powers held by the Moonlight Greatsword. Sure, it can't block, but you can still parry. In regards to rings, we need to run the Regenerator's Ring for the 4 HP per second regeneration that stacks with our blessed weapons for a total of 10 HP per second regeneration. And, of course, the Ring of Sincere Prayer, which increases our miracle damage by a very generous margin. Of course, this also changes the casting animation. Sure, it takes a longer time to cast spells, but it is not too much of a difference, and everyone loves to praise the sun. Generally speaking, I also recommend some alternative rings that you can equip to get different effects, but honestly, I really think that this is the best setup for this build. Granted, it may not be the absolute best, but it is certainly the most efficient for what we are trying to achieve. Moving on to spells, we do not use magic spells and only 2 miracles. Our miracles of choice are Second Chance and Wrath of God. In regards to Second Chance, this should not be a surprise to anyone. Definitely the best miracle in the game and one of the best ways to increase your survivability, this miracle is just too good. I cannot see myself making any build without it unless I am specifically trying out new things. Use it, abuse it, and survive. The other miracle is Wrath of God. Combining the facts that we have a really high miracle assist on our talisman, along with the fact that we get extra miracle damage from the Ring of Sincere Prayer, we end up with a truly fearsome source of damage. Not only that, but its area of effect is considerable, and it would not be strange to see it take out multiple enemies in one shot. I thought that it would be a great complement to the Large Sword of Moonlight, and fortunately, I was not wrong. That being said, this is a good time to mention that, since these spells have quite the hefty MP cost, and we are running the minimum necessary to cast them, you will find yourself consuming a lot of spices. Make sure you stock up on these. They are just as important as healing items. Finally, the armor. The only piece of armor that is required is the headpiece. The silver coronet is an absolute must because the boost of MP that it gives us is the determining factor that pushes us past the 100 MP mark to be able to cast Second Chance and Wrath of God. We are min-maxing 13 intelligence plus the silver coronet in order to reach this amount of MP. It is absolutely required. That being said, the rest of the armor is irrelevant. I chose the fluted set in order to get the standard knight look, and I am happy with how it performs. You can choose whatever you believe looks better on your character. If you choose to take this build into PvE, then you are making the right choice. The combination of the Large Sword of Moonlight with the Blessed Night Sword gives you the option that you need to tackle the challenges that the game offers. All of this is backed up by the damage surge given by Wrath of God when you either need crowd control or a particularly big attack. As a result, we have a versatile melee build that takes advantage of different circumstances, whether that is going through an enemy's shield or providing quick and safe damage from a straight sword in order to increase your chances of success. Do not forget that this build also provides a great amount of survivability in the form of constant health regeneration and of course the security that is Second Chance. This build gives you multiple fun ways to deal damage and a good safety net, making sure that your mistakes are not fatal. But of course, there are some aspects in which this build falls a little short in, mainly damage. Unfortunately, the Large Sword of Moonlight maintains a rather low AR for its weapon type, and the Blessed Night Sword, while quicker and stronger, is, at the end of the day, split damage. As a result, the further you go into deeper game cycles, the more difficult it will become to defeat enemies and bosses. I can tell you that this build performs very well in New Game and New Game Plus. I can also tell you that it is still enough to beat New Game Plus 2. Unfortunately, I do not recommend it for going further into New Game Plus 3 and beyond. I feel that the damage is much too low for these game cycles and your chance of success is greatly reduced. Now, if you decide to use this build in co-op as a Blue Phantom, then you will be extremely useful to your host. It is my opinion that this build shines in jolly cooperation, and personally, this is where I myself use this build the most. You can be the front lineman while your host attacks enemies with spells from behind you, or if your host wants to take the heat of battle, you can cast Wrath of God from behind his line, obliterating anything around you. Thanks to the damage bonuses that we get from white character tendency and the possibility of the allies ring, the lower AR from our weapons is not as much of a penalty while in multiplayer. This opens up a situation where you can be useful to your friend and, at the same time, have a lot of fun playing with this build. Furthermore, it is in jolly cooperation where I would consider switching out some rings. I already mentioned the allies ring, but the cling ring is also a good choice here. Whether you want more damage or more health, there are answers to your problems. Switching gears, let's talk about PvP. Initially, I thought that the lower damage that this build brings to the table might be too much of a problem to overcome. That said, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that this is not the case. Yes, there are other builds that deal more damage in a PvP scenario. That being said, the different tools that you have will allow you to overcome the most common challenges that you can naturally find in PvP. First, remember that you have available to you two possible playstyles. You can two-hand the Large Sword of Moonlight to cut through enemy defensive players that choose to hide behind their shield, but also you can fall back on the Blessed Night Sword to employ your own sword and board style, which will be useful to fight against any overly aggressive player. Combining both of these styles, I found that there were chances of success in most of the encounters that I faced. Now, this means that you, as a player, will have to be good at using both of these styles. The skills required to two-hand a greatsword are different than the ones required to run a sword and board strategy. You have quite the defensive power to make mistakes thanks to your health regeneration, and often I found that opponents become nervous and much more aggressive when they see that your health is recovering. I will definitely say that it is not easy to win with this build in PvP. Other builds like the Dragon Bone Smasher or a magic build have the power of dealing large amounts of damage in a single hit, making any attack potentially fatal. We do not have that power here. This build is much more methodical and requires a lot more observation on your end. It is up to you to understand your opponent's strategies and react accordingly. For example, in PvP, I would definitely change the Wrath of God Miracle for Anti-Magic Field. In this manner, if you see that your opponent looks to be a melee fighter, you cast Second Chance. But if, on the other hand, you see that they are a caster type, I will definitely go with Anti-Magic Field. This build requires a lot of player knowledge and reaction. It is not easy to play, but I find it to be very effective nonetheless, if done right at least. The result is that, if you're looking for an easy to use, easy to win with build, then this is not it. With this build, we can have a lot of fun using a lot of different tools, but that means that the more tools we use, the more knowledge we need. Player skill is definitely needed here, and it is the most important part of the build. You will not get any easy outs with this setup. My favorite weapon in the game and my favorite stat in the game come together to form a build that is definitely more fun than it is powerful. This by no means makes the build a waste of time. On the contrary, depending on what you're looking for, this will be the best build you ever make. To be able to comfortably beat the game, or to be able to provide good support to a host in jolly cooperation. Hell, even putting up a good fight in any PvP encounter are all things that this build can achieve. Not only that, but you are doing it with the best looking weapon in the game, at least in my opinion. I fully recommend that you try this build. The time you invest in it is definitely worth it. You will not be disappointed, and it is a good idea to always keep it in your back pocket for the next time that you need to help a friend run through the game. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I get to see you on the next one.